names.
Right.
And this weekend, historically, people come up to you like, hey, Rich,
remember
my name? Like, thank you.
What's up, bud?
Yeah. How you doing, pal?
How you doing, brother?
Yeah. But that's, that's a little anxiety around this weekend every year at this.
But now.
Yeah, especially now, right? People like, and I'm terrible. I'm really am terrible with names. I mean, it's not out of disrespect. It's just that it's not, I'm not wired that way.
So it's also, for me, there's only so much room in the hard drive.
Yeah.
Right? I meet a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
You meet a lot of people.
I've been blessed to meet a lot of people, a lot of wrestling people for sure, right? Yeah. And it's,
So,
yeah.
all right, so let's get started here, because I am so stoked to talk to you about this. You're getting inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame.
And I can't believe it. When Leroy called me, actually, I was in the middle of a session in Ponte Vedra, Spain at the U23 Worlds. Remember, it was absolutely this morning. And Leroy called me and said, hey, Rich, I'm just calling to let you know you're going to be a distinguished member. And I paused for a second, and I thought, waiting for John to break in that they were having a boring day in Stillwater, and like, yeah, right. And he didn't, and my first reaction was, no way. I'm Leroy, there's no way. I can't accept. I don't deserve this. I mean, knowing what it means to be in this hall, I don't deserve it. And he said, Rich, let me give you a little word of advice. When you get inducted into the Hall of Fame, you accept. And I said, well, good point, probably. And but and in all honesty, right? It's like this place always takes my breath away when I come here. And having been involved in the sport my entire life, really, and to know what it means to be a distinguished member is like I don't deserve it for sure, but I'm so unbelievably honored and humbled by it. But I accept this on behalf of others, not me. I'm just been incredibly blessed to work with USA Wrestling for over 3 decades and know what the organization stands for and the backbone of the volunteers that get up every single day and try to move our sport forward. I mean, I feel a little bit of an obligation then to accept on their behalf. So, but man, just unbelievable to think about this. Last night, my childhood idol was Andy Ryan, and I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. And we joke about the first time I met Andy was at our high school coach had taken us up to a dual meet, and Andy was wrestling for the Badgers, and and I followed him in high school even when he was wrestling at Stoughton High School. And we were walking down the hallway, and I and my teammate. And Andy stepped out of the locker room, and I was just like, oh my God, that's Andy Ryan. And what do I say to him? I walk up to him, shake his hand and say, Andy Ryan, I just want to let you know you're my idol. And to this day, my buddy back in Wisconsin still teases me about that. But it's just, I mean, to think that Andy Ryan's here and, just to put that all together, nothing I'd ever dream would be possible for me.
For someone that doesn't know, because I did a bunch of poking around before I did these interviews. For someone that doesn't know, you had very humble beginnings at USA Wrestling. You didn't exactly walk in as the ED, right? Talk to me about your first day.
First day. So it's kind of it's a story I've told a lot, but so the first day, and I came from a small school, and a small town. I grew up in a little town called Boscobel, Wisconsin, in southwestern Wisconsin. Wrestled all through, grade school, elementary school, and high school. I actually played baseball for a couple years in college, but I have a degree in athletic administration and business, and to fulfill my college curriculum, I need to do an internship. And my academic advisor said, you can pick three opportunities. I picked a health club in Chicago and another sports organization and the U.S. Olympic Committee. I remember went into my academic advisor and she said, Rich, don't take the Olympic Committee one off, and there's a couple thousand people apply for like 15 internships, and your grades aren't that good. You're not even a wrestler. I said, well, I am a wrestler. I was wrestling actually. We had these tournaments in Wisconsin, these old timers tournaments. So I'd wrestle on the weekends and just still staying active with wrestling. And I said, you know what, I'm going to apply anyway. And long story short, I got a call from a guy named Ben Bennett, and he was at USA Wrestling at the time, and we hit it off like that. Like, first call, he said, I want to offer you this internship. And I mean, I'm like over the moon. I turned down the actual internship in Chicago. I went down there, and at the end of my interview, I said, so what am I going to do here at this health club? And he goes, Rich, it's not complicated. Member wants a towel, you give him a towel. Member wants a bottle of water, you give him a bottle of water. It's not complicated. And I said, that's not for me. And I remember driving back from Chicago with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, Michelle, and she's like, well, what are you going to do? Because you need this internship to graduate, and you turn it down. You only got 2, and the one they said there was no chance for. And so anyway, so when Ben called me and I was given the opportunity, I went over the moon. And so time came to show up in Colorado Springs. I'd never even been on an airplane before. Got on my little pickup, and Michelle and I drove to Colorado Springs. I checked into the Olympic Training Center, was in a dorm room there, and Monday morning got up 7:30. I'm at USA Wrestling. I walk in, tie on, and walk up to the receptionist, and she says, "Can I help you?" And I go, "I'm Rich Bender. I'm your intern." And she goes, I go, "Excuse me?" I'm here. She goes, "We aren't having no intern." I go, No. This is the legit thing. I'm already checked in at the Olympic Training Center. Here's my documents." And she goes, "You're not listening to me. We're not having an intern." I go, can you get Ben Bennett up here? And she goes, "Ben Bennett got fired last week." And so I like, can I talk to whoever's in charge? I didn't know. Dave Miller was the guy that was the CEO at the time. And she goes, "No, he's not available." And so I literally, take my little briefcase and walk down I'm like, my mind's going like, what am I going to do? I walked back to her and I said, "Just so you know, I'll wash the windows, I'll mop the floors, I'll vacuum, I'll do anything. I need this internship to graduate." She goes, "I don't know what to tell you, but we can't do it." So I go back to the U.S. Olympic Committee, and a guy named Bob Paul was in charge of the intern program. And I told him what happened. He goes, "What?" So he calls over, gets the same receptionist, and she tells him the same thing. "You're not having an intern." And he says, "Well, let me talk to Dave Miller." Well, he got through to Dave Miller, so he has Dave Miller, who I never met in my life, who was from Madison.
He doesn't know you from Madison.
Doesn't know me from Madison. He's from Madison, Wisconsin. And this is a lesson for, sometimes it's just where you're from matters. And so this Bob Paul gets on the phone with Dave Miller and starts talking to him about this internship. And Dave backs up what the receptionist says. We can't have it. We're in big time turmoil here. I've had to let a lot of staff go. There's no way that we can give this guy a legitimate educational experience. We can't do it. It's not fair to him. And this Bob Paul goes off on Dave Miller and says, "Let me tell you something. USA Wrestling will never get another intern from the U.S. Olympic Committee, and there'll probably be other repercussions. You can't do this to people. This guy needs us to graduate from college." And Dave Miller says, "Well, where's he from?" And Bob Paul puts the phone, where are you from? And I said, "I'm from Boscobel, Wisconsin." And he tells Dave Miller that, and Dave Miller says, "Send him over." went over and sat down with Dave, and Dave's like, "Look, we don't have an organized program here. Ben Bennett was going to organize that, but he's not here anymore. And if you'll be patient with me, no problem. We'll work through this. But don't expect some valuable educational experience here." And I said, "No problem. I'm just like honored to be here." And at that point, I'm just wanting to get through so I could graduate. And it was probably 6 weeks after that, Dave offered me a job to stay during my internship, and the rest is history.
What did the internship look like, though? So you must have made some type of an impression.
Well, so it was interesting because at the time, USA Wrestling wasn't in turmoil. We didn't know whether we were going to make payroll, right? And it was, obviously we weren't even paying athletes or anything like that. So it was, just keeping the doors open was a concern. We had overspent some things on a budget, and it just wasn't great at USA Wrestling. And so what Dave, we agreed is that, look, I want you to help in our events. Like, our events needs help. Our events department needs help. Can you help this guy named Dave Voigt, who, Dave was there and doing a lot of things. Our staff was probably at the time, 6-8 people maybe, and, doing a lot of stuff. And so I gravitated towards events. And remember one of the first things I had to do was call Lee Kemp. And for something, I think we were doing a Northern Plains regional, might have been trying to propositioned Lee for a sponsorship when he was running his car dealership in Minneapolis. And as you know, growing up in Wisconsin, obviously Lee Kemp's like an Andy Ryan kind of guy. And I remember talking to Lee, and he was so incredibly nice to me. Like, I'm this intern, you know, but I mean, showed genuine interest in me. Oh, you're from Wisconsin, that's awesome. And, you know, just really, really positive conversation. I remember hanging up the phone, calling my dad. You are not going to believe who I just talked to. I just talked to Lee Kemp in person. And, you know, so, I mean, I guess, so your original question, I mean, it was, Dave gave me a lot of leeway to help where you know, where it was needed. And I think it's kind of it's a little bit of a trademark for working at USA Wrestling to this day is, right, there's an expectation that, you know, you might be, you know, the intern, but you might have to do a lot of other things, or you might work in the events department, you might need to help the national team. And so, yeah, you got to wear a lot of hats. And I mean, obviously we're much differently resourced today, but yeah, that was my start. It was pretty interesting, and think about, you know, a lot like my career, a lot of twists and turns that, you know, things go a different direction. I'm not sitting here today.
Well, a lot of twists and turns in the same building, right, for the most part.
Yeah.
But it looked like, from where I was sitting and from everything I've read, that it was always just wrestling, wrestling, wrestling. In fact, so much so that you had a teacher.
Mr. Fitzgerald, 7th grade science teacher. And I mean, I grew up in small town America, like actually in the country. My mom passed away when I was in 4th grade, and lived out in the country with my cousins. A lot are coming here this weekend, and moved into town in 7th grade. And so I was kind of trying to find myself, but wrestling was it for me. And my grades in my science class that year had went from like a 90 to an 80 to a 70. And I think they may even have that report card here. And the back of the report card says, wrestling, wrestling, wrestling. All Rich wants to do is talk about wrestling. Can you tell him there's more to life than wrestling? And God rest his soul, Mr. Fitzgerald's passed away since, but every time we went back to Boswell and saw him, you know, it's a little town of a couple thousand people, I always tease him about, hey, it was a good call there. There is more to life than wrestling, but it's been a big part of my life. But yeah, yeah, that's it. I'm a one-trick pony, but that's, yeah, that's right.
Okay. What is it about this sport?
Oh, man.
What is it, Rich? What is it? Because you played baseball in high school, but it's still wrestling.
Yeah, I'd still identify myself as a wrestler. Not, I mean, and right, I take a lot of liberty when I say that, but in the sport, and get asked that question a lot in the Olympic family, because, you know, there's a lot of resources that come from individuals that have wrestled and been successful in life beyond that, and every one of those folks that are, you know, have had that experience go back to wrestling as the foundation for their success in life. It's, you know, whether it's been, you know, hey, I've been able to outwork everybody because of what I learned in wrestling. I understand sacrifice that most of the people that I'm competing with professionally, they don't have any clue what it's like to sacrifice. They have no idea what it's like to go out in a mat, you know, with just a singlet on. And as Henry Cejudo said, to be successful in wrestling, all you need is a pair of shoes and a dream. And some truth to that, right? And I think, but it's, you know, and I mean this with every ounce of my being when I say this. Anybody that's ever wrestled is better, period. There's not an exception ever. Never been an exception. It's someone's not better from having wrestled or been around the sport. And so, I mean, it's, you know, and it's cliche to say, right? I mean, it's hard work, sacrifice, dedication, but I think it's that everything combined, it's what wrestling is, right? It's not, and you're, you know, the benefit that you got from wrestling probably a little bit different than mine, right? And yet, you know, this sport is, without question, I mean, it's biblical, right? It's God's sport. We know that, but it changes lives differently than other sports do. And I know that's really, you know, there's, especially around the Olympic circles where you're talking with, you know, people that, you know, been devoted their lives to other sports. Wrestling's different. And you know, what is it? You know, I don't know that anybody can say this is it. This is how you articulate what wrestling is, because it means it's so different to everyone that's touched by it. So, but it's, I mean, it's cool for sure.
It's did you grow up in a wrestling family? Did your dad wrestle?
No, I was only child, and I said earlier, my mom passed away really young, and I was in 4th grade. Only child, lived out in the country, and outside of 7 miles outside of a town that had 2,000 people, so southwestern rural Wisconsin. And my dad wasn't an athlete, and my cousins were actively involved in wrestling. My oldest cousin Dennis, who's coming here, he was a state qualifier for our high school in 1976, and I still remember the match. He got beat by a guy in the state championships, Paul Noonian, and remember it today. And remember how walking into the field house, and Dennis was a good wrestler, and all my cousins, Rusty and Dan and Rick, they're all coming this weekend. All were wrestlers too, but we lived out in the country, and really that's all we did. We wrestled. Like, we made our own mat, and so didn't come from a sports family. But then when my dad remarried and we moved into town, I went from an only child to one of 6, and Jeff, Jim, Janice, Gene, and Joel, and Rich. And all platinum blondes, all like wicked smart. We'd go places and people would say to my younger brother, "So who's your friend, Joel?" Like, it's my brother. But so didn't grow up in a sports family. I mean, I did grow up in a larger sportsman, but Dad didn't wrestle, and was just one of those great fellas that just supported me in what I wanted to do, and just got bit by the wrestling bug early on and drank that whole pitcher of Kool-Aid from almost day one.
Uh-huh. And if you call them and tell them that you're getting inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. I wish I could do it, man, but yeah.
What do you think he'd say?
I like to think he'd be proud. Yeah. I thought a lot about that since I got that call from Leroy about what my dad would think. But really grateful for the opportunities that he gave me, and yeah, I miss him, but I think he'd say, "Well done."
Especially in the manner in which you've done it. Because, forgive me, and I'm not taking any of these people off of the pedestal that they're on, right? You're surrounded by greatness everywhere you are, right? But you did more than just win medals. You did. You've had an impact in raising the level of the sport across the world, whether you've recognized it or not. So, have you ever even considered that?
I haven't, because I really, truly am not just saying it. I'm here because other people have given me opportunities to do things. I talked about my dad earlier, and and this is cliche to say too, but my career's not complicated, right? I came in from day one with one objective, and that's to outwork everybody, right? And obviously that pays off in the sport of wrestling, and the sport exposes you, and it maybe probably ultimately helped me to be an average wrestler growing up. Is that sport exposed me? I didn't invest what I knew I needed to invest in the sport, and I didn't achieve what I thought. When I was in elementary school and junior high, because of my cousins would took me under their wing, and I won a lot. Like, I didn't lose hardly at all when I was younger, and had a lot of success. And then as I got older, got distracted and knew I wasn't doing what I needed to do to achieve my full athletic potential on the mat. And I think that ultimately paid off for me professionally, is that I learned my lesson. Hey, this sport, you're going to be involved in the sport, it'll expose you. So if you're not going to outwork people, then you need to be doing something else.
You said you walked in to USA Wrestling. Mr. Bennett had a job and then lost it. I'm sure there have been people along the way who have come through your position and moved through that position. How has the position of executive director at USA Wrestling changed since you've been there? How has the the job title, not just the title, but how has the job description changed?
Yeah, and I've been blessed to work with some like absolute studs. I mean, and Dave Miller led the organization in a really rocky time, and I owe a lot to Dave Miller. I mean, obviously he gave me my opportunities. A guy named Toby Stewart, who's coming here this weekend, was the guy that picked me out of this, saw wrestling as a hobby in my resume, this stack of resumes at the U.S. Olympic Committee. And so, I mean, in terms of how the job has changed, so I've worked with some great leaders. Dave Miller, Jim Shearer were the two executive directors that I worked for. And, you know, Dave, I didn't get the chance to work with Dave as much as, you know, as I probably would have hoped. But Jim taught me how to be an administrator. And obviously Jim Shearer's, right, he's in this place and as a wrestler, right? And obviously a big contributor to our sport. But how it's changed, I mean, when Jim managed through crisis, right? Dave was there, and I mean, I remember we joke about it, not really joke about it, but there was a Black Wednesday or Black Tuesday, whatever, where Jim literally had to let, I think, 3/4 of the staff go at USA Wrestling. So we had went from a small staff to even a smaller staff. And but I learned a lot from Jim. I mean, Jim, wicked smart guy that could look around the corner, and I owe a lot to him. But I think my job today is a lot different than theirs because we're different. We're resourced differently today, right? I mean, I'm sure that when Dave Miller and Jim Shearer showed up at the office every day, the first thing that they worried about was, do we have enough to just take care of our basic operations at USR, enough resources? And to be honest with you, you know, for USA Wrestling, we're blessed. I mean, our membership's on fire. The U.S. Olympic Committee's been a great supporter, and we can always use more resources. But I mean, I think we're able now in my job to look around the corner a little bit, and not worry about kind of the basic fundamentals. Not that we ever want to lose sight of that. We won't lose sight of that. But able to reimagine stuff where when I first started, it was different, right? We were focused on these foundational responsibilities to, you know, pay salaries and to make sure athletes got this basic support, and not think about how we can change and reimagine. And I think that's, you know, a different, I think a little bit different leadership style for me than Jim is. And maybe it's because Jim's just way smarter than me. I'm a firm believer in allowing people to do their jobs and kind of stay out of their way, so to speak. And yeah, you know, I think my leadership's a little bit different than Jim's, where Jim still wanted to know what was going on with everything, where, you know, and, you know, I like to lead with trust, and, you know, get your job done, no problem. You don't get your job done, you're going to be held accountable. And so probably changed from, you know, the fundamental thing is probably how our resources, we're going to be a $20 million a year company next year. And just going through our budget process for the first time ever. And we're at 292,000 members, first time ever. And, you know, supported with, you know, the medal fund and private donors differently than we have been. Now we got to keep fighting hard, right? We got to keep pushing that envelope because we don't have enough resources.
It's nice though, right?
It's nice that we can, yeah. And, you know, knock on wood, right? I mean, you'd asked me this, you know, a couple of months before COVID, I probably would have said the same thing. And then COVID hit, and it's like, oh, whoa, you know, we do have to kind of go back to the basics here. We can't think about reimagining stuff, and ultimately we did, but and ultimately proved really beneficial to us.
I'm running out of time, and I could do this for hours.
I'm sorry, I'm a talker.
No, I'm deadly serious. I could do this for hours. So I've got about a minute and change left. Try to answer these in one sentence.
Okay.
Favorite competition memory?
Favorite competition memory? Man, there's been so many. I mean,
I gotcha.
You asked me this question before, right? And I think I said it. I think I was consistent. I mean, obviously, Rulon and winning the worlds and women's wrestling being added, and that first medal and first Olympic gold medal for the women, and you know. But I think it was probably Bruce Baumgartner winning his bronze medal in '96, and just because my connection as a competition manager and knowing Bruce, and you know, probably You know, that was. It's kind of funny thinking back that so much for the 1 minute, but thinking back, most of the big memories aren't necessarily gold medals. You know, and I remember Clarissa Chun winning the bronze medal or Adam Wheeler winning the bronze medal. Obviously, Brunon's medal his second medal was a big deal. And I'm an emotional guy, you know, bawling like a baby. Obviously, when Kyle won we won the Worlds and beat the Russians in Paris. And yeah, I remember like this euphoria. And I mean, it was like unbelievable. And kind of catching myself, and I was like, what am I doing? I was like hugging this person, and the tears running down my face, and this guy's shirt was like wet from me bawling. And I look up, and it's Nenad Lalovic just popping in my head like this. Like so, you know, so much for this big, tough U.S. guy. But, I mean, I'm sorry I couldn't just say one, but it's,
fine.
Yeah.
There's no way you could.
Yeah.
All right. I got another tough one for you.
Okay.
Quickly, who's on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling?
So on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling, and I'm saying this just competitively too, but in my mind, who are the greatest wrestlers? And I obviously, right, there's people that have had different contributions, but I mean, you can't discount John Smith. You got to keep Bruce Baumgartner on there, Jordan Burroughs, Adeline Gray.
That's 4.
Did I get one more?
No, you get it 4.
There, I would say that was no disrespect to anyone else, but it's right, you can look that up, right? Adeline's won 6. You know, Jordan's set the record, or going to set the record, and John's 6 in a row, Bruce 13. I mean, that's probably Mount Rushmore for me.
Got it. You're the best.